County Commissioners Budget Workshop for August 17th, 2020. At this time, it's now a little after 9 a.m. Supervisor of Elections is not with us this morning. We have all the documentation we need from her, so I think we're good. We'll move on to the Property Appraiser's Office. Mr. Lamar Jenkins. I'd like to welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I guess the best way to do this is, I'm sure you've all have had an opportunity to review this budget. And if you all have got a question, I'll try my best to answer it. If not, I'll go back and sit down. I'm just concerned that you put up, you just have to stamp things to approve it.
Do we have any questions? Or,
I don't. I guess you can sit down.
I think you're in pretty good shape, Mr. Lamar.
Thank you. There's one explanation I might just point out to you that somebody, one of you all might not understand. I don't know. But anyway, I think I had to make, well, I did, an amended budget. And this is for rewiring the computer room in the office. And that number was $36,400. And I didn't know if y'all really understood that or where this money was going to. But just to give you a little feedback, I guess I've been living in the past for all these, for several years, but the computer that office has had has been there since, I believe, 1986. And the Department of Revenue has been wanting me to change for years, but I wouldn't do it because it was the cheapest way out. But it come to be last year that I had to make a decision to put in a new computer. And in doing this, the wire in the room where the computer sits and so forth is not adequate wire. So we're going to have to rewire that. Just to give you an explanation of that expenditure.
Fair enough. Anybody have any questions, comments? Mr. Lamar has. It seems like you got quite a few years out of that. We appreciate you.
Thank you. And it's been a pleasure to work with the Board of County Commissioners of Suwannee County for a number of years. And I guess, of course, next year you won't be seeing my face here as a constitutional officer. So I would ask that you be very careful with the new person coming in and give them patience and guidance and just enjoy being together.
We appreciate that. We appreciate you. We appreciate your service to this county for all these years.
But I thank you all.
Yes, sir.
It's been a good board to work with.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
To my board here, gentlemen, y'all try to pull these mics close and kind of find that sweet spot for everybody where we can all hear each other. I will say, and I did when we first started, we've all had these budget workshop books for weeks, and we're going to try to streamline this process this morning and move on through here. We have people that we're missing. We also have, high concerns with the virus and everything that's going on. So if you have something that's close to your heart, we'll discuss it at that time. But I'm going to move pretty fast, is what I'm saying. At this time, Mr. Barry Baker. Mr. Baker, welcome this morning.
Thank you, sir. I'm just going to say it's read that. I want to take this thing up. I can't see it. Ours is kind of tab. Did you talk on that mic? Yes. It's one of ours is kind of net increase was about $23,414.92. It's where those are attributed to, it's the raises, we have the same raises that y'all had in yours, in case of those go through. If not, it's where we would, sort of where that part would come up. Also, we had a vacancy field. We used a current employee, so instead of getting a ground zero person, that's where this person just had, is allowed to transfer. And then also, there was some FRS increases. And so, it's the reason for the $23,000 increase. And also, our IT budget is found in tab 25. It'd be the last page of tab 25. And for the thing there, it does show an increase. Our amount for last year was ours for last year is $261,500. And it looks like it's an increase. It's actually a decrease because it's where y'all also maintain $75,000 that we were able to draw from towards the budget. And we're not asking for that. So it's a net decrease in our budget of about $38,955 for the IT budget. Is there any questions?
Do I have any questions or comments for Mr. Baker? Seeing none.
It was the only thing that I would ask is for that, if you look in our budget, is where we do have a contingency. Talking with Randy, we thought that's the best way to do it. And trying to put aside a little bit over like a 3-year period or to buy the stuff that we're needing. And also is for that we are not asking for any additional money for the ADG finance software. We did not purchase that this past year. We're not asking for additional money. What we are asking is if we could take the money that we roll, it's the money that we had set aside for this current year and roll it over. We'll set it aside for this.
It's actually, Mr. Chairman, it's actually in the budget now. I don't anticipate that being taken out. There's no reason to, but we did roll that funding forward. And what Mr. Baker was speaking of earlier is we're escrowing for some servers on that line. That'll be about a 3-year escrow until we've got sufficient money to make this purchase.
I think we're good. Appreciate you, Mr. Baker. At this time, our sheriff, Sam St. John. Sheriff, I know this is going to take a few minutes. See if that microphone, if you can get it adjusted just right, up high enough. I don't know if you have to adjust the lever or we need some help, but
What about there?
that'll work.
Well, I would have thought I'd just follow suit with Lamar Jenkins. He could get a rubber stamp and I'll go back and sit down. Let me start with these one first, with the emergency management EOC. The EMPA grant is for the salaries, and last year was 105,806, which is the same thing as this year. The EMP grant for equipment last year was 48,714. This year it's 48,846, with just a little bit of increase. And then they got the county match. They went up 6,000 with it, and this is for the CERT team. So it went up from 36 to 42. And we've got quite a few CERT team members. You know, they're volunteers for us. I think this is for the cover for the insurance and so forth on it. And as you know, they help out quite a bit with different events going on, and plus if they have a hurricane, and also they're trained. I know Sherry might can tell you a little more about the training, but I know like if they, the different, with the schools for the shelters, you know, they're trained to do that there, so that would save us quite a bit of money. So you know, this is probably just a trade-off right there. You know, in case a hurricane does come along, you know, they can help us out there. But that's the EOC budget there.
I have any questions for the sheriff about EOC? I say I'm very supportive of the CERT team. They do a wonderful job. I mean, there's so many volunteers for that I don't really understand how we got by without them.
Yes, sir.
For all the years, but it's a great program. Every time there's an event, a catastrophe of some type, I mean, those folks step up. Yes. But go ahead, Sheriff, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay, and then the sheriff's office budget. As you see, I gave you, I think, everyone the latest update. We just mirrored, pretty much mirrored the 1920 budget. The only increase that we have would be salaries. With 1%, 50%, or 1% and 50-cent raise for the employees, and everything else is mirrored except until when you get down to the taxes, Medicare taxes, retirement. I'll put up, which is a whole lot. We don't have a whole lot of say so on that one there. But the good thing is that on the life and health insurance, it went down 5%, so that's pretty good savings there. So if you look at that part there, it's only a 0.83% increase. And then you drop down to professional service, computer services, all on this next line down. Everything is mirrored from 19 to 20 to 2021, all the way down your line, except for we've asked for the 200 that we lost last year back in the operating. And the only other thing is that the increase would be the capital expense is from the 91 for a radio system. Now the 200, I know we'll probably have to do some negotiation on that one there. I realize the money's tight, but I know we'll sit and talk about that. But I'm really passionate about the first payment on the radio system. A little history is, I don't have the date with me right there, but it's been about 2 or 3 months ago. We had a shooting out there at the Call Lodge, and right when the call come in, our radio went completely down. Our main radio went down, the backup went down, so we had to communicate on our cell phones, which was, we got the job done, but it still causes some problems, delays and so forth. And then the last 2 weeks, I've got a call, twice in the last 2 weeks, that the radio system is down. So we got to scramble and try to figure out what's going on with it. So the reason I'm saying is it's just getting, our radio system is getting worse, because it's, because of the age and so forth on it, and I think because of the technology part of it is just not up to speed or anything. So, like I say, I'm really passionate about the money for the radio system. But guys, another thing that make sure you're aware of is that we get, you see the total number down here, the 10,309, but you got to realize that you got school board payment, the ACB payment, and the Bradford payment, and that's $460,000 there that National Grid have to pay up front, but you get reimbursed for that. So just kind of keep that in mind before you start hitting too hard.
Do I have any questions, comments, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a comment, if I could.
Yes, sir.
Just because I want to add a little information on that radio issue. Previously, we had discussed $75,000 a year in a payment, and then that was going to be the same amount that fire rescue was going to put in. I began inquiring last week about a finance mechanism. Now, I don't want us to get bogged down into that discussion today, but I did go ahead because I recognize that we can't drop $1.5 million in our radio system. There's no way to fit that in this budget. So I went ahead and obtained the information on the finance schedule. And these radios have an anticipated life of 15 years. So I ran financing in 10 years. It comes to $182,500 a year, roughly $91,000 a piece instead of $75,000. I just wanted to make sure that you understood that. That's the significance of that $91,000 number that's in here. We will have to visit this issue. Today's a budget workshop. If you put that money in there now and agree to that, then we will revisit the issue on a regular board meeting later, and we can break the details back in on the company and the equipment and everything else. But additionally, and the sheriff and I have talked about this, I want to share this with you. Those of you that were here several years ago, I put together a capital improvement plan. And when I did that, I went around and I spoke to all of the constitutional officers. At the time, Tony Cameron was the sheriff. I was looking at a 5 to 7 year time frame. We discussed that building out there on 136 at the time. Tony told me that he felt that they could survive for another 7 years, but that time has come now. I would ask the board to consider, we don't have the money to budget for that this year, but I'd ask the board to consider putting an escrow line in the budget. We just put $1 on that line right now. That line needs to be in there. We need to start working toward that line as we continue moving forward over the years. But it isn't going to happen unless we put the line in there. It's no different than the line that I asked the clerk of the court to put in and start escrowing for their servers for the next 3 years. But it's something that we need to consider. I know that it would be a struggle for us to even think about this $200,000 this year that the sheriff is asking for. But going forward, if we put a line in that budget, we can start planning toward that next year. Does that make sense to you?
That's what it does to me.
Commissioner, have that question?
No, Sheriff has something to that already, so I know he's going to need something in the near future.
I guess everybody needs to kind of discuss, what we're feeling. I'll start it out. I don't have a problem with that. Obviously, we're in tight times here. Our contingency is very low for the countywide. Sheriff, I'll make a proposal here just on my part. Now, I'll speak for the board. Everyone else will have their thoughts. But my idea was if we could not have the 200,000 this year, but have the 91,000 in there because I'm passionate about the radios too. I want that to happen. I do. I'm ready. As soon as we get things going, do that. That would, if I'm looking correct, that would make your budget 10,109,000 would be the final dollar on that.
Yes.
My question to you is, and then also with that being said, I would like to follow up with what Mr. Harris said and create that escrow line this year for the start the building fund. And I would be in favor of as we move forward next year, when you come back and you have monies that you every year you talk about returning or what your savings was, that we could put those monies in there for that building fund. So it's kind of a couple two-step things here as far as what was on my mind about trying to kind of plan out. But, my question to you is, would you be acceptable to something on that number?
Yes, sir. Like I say, as everybody knows, that the COVID has kind of hit us hard, and just like I say, I knew we was going to have to negotiate on the 200, but I like I said, the rate of fund, I would think about it. But if we could put the rate of money in there, I have no problem with what you just said, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
And just so the other commissioners know, Sheriff was talking about not having service in certain areas. It's not even that far out that you don't have service. There was an accident on 129 here recently. Resulted in some deaths. Right there on 129, north of town.
Yeah.
And I was one of the first ones there. Your deputy could not speak on his handheld.
Right, yeah.
His car. So
Yeah, that.
the radios are needed.
Yes.
I totally agree. I feel like I'm an important reason, I say I don't need to say everybody's up there. I need to be for myself. But I'm supportive of the radio system, and I understand that we need to move forward modern times and update things. I don't have a problem with that at all. I guess basically at this point in time, the ball's in your court with if you could live with that number that we just discussed. I mean, I'm not interested in sitting up here spending days beating the sheriff up. That's not what, I understand last year we was back into quite a few times, but I mean, just to simplify, I'm respectful of you in your office, and I want to, try to move forward. So,
Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with that, Chairman. I realize I'm kind of hard, but, and on what, Randy said about the line item for it, we can, we need to deal with that and all because, you know, that would be a next thing that we're gonna have to kind of look at, because, you know, the building that we're in, I think it's 30-some odd years old. We've outgrown it now, you know, so we got the guys doing some remodeling in there now. They kind of took some stuff away and doing some repainting and remodeling in there to make room for some more office space in there. But that's gonna be coming, you know. But right now, my priority will be the radios, and you know, we're just framing the office, you know, what we have right now. We can get by with it until, you know, we can get something working on the building.
And just so we're clear on the, like you've done this year, the 91, and moving forward, it's under my thoughts, and what I would like to see is that continue to be included in the budget every year. You know, not coming back and revisiting, basically, I'm saying you come to it, and that's included in your budget, the radio, continuously moving forward as we pay, you know, as part of your budget, I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
So, which is already there. I'm just saying that's what I would like to see. And it's taken care of. So we're not sitting here next year talking about a radio. You got that included?
Yes, sir. Okay.
Included this year, hopefully we'll be under contract next year. Have to be.
Correct. Well, yeah, you're right. Yeah. Anybody from the board have any thoughts or comments on this?
Mr. Chairman, just a question. For Mr. Harris, last year we had a contingency for, or we had not a contingency, we had an escrow that we were putting aside. I think we had $100,000 or $200,000 something, okay, put aside for revision.
We used it.
Building, we used it. But that was under capital expenditures, not, was it under the sheriff's budget?
I'm not, I can't speak necessarily to what happened. I'd have to go back and look at that. But what I'm talking about right now is if we create an escrow line, it'll actually be in the board's budget.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The escrow line for the replacement of that building needs to be under the BOCC. That's 1110. It's budget 1110. We would escrow there.
Proposing it, you said line item, and then Mr. Gamble was saying that it's into the contract, but, I'm good with it, and, because I want to do it more important. I think the radio is very important to, have, and come out safety. I'm ready to move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Fleming. Do I have any other comments for the sheriff? Sheriff, you're good to go.
All right.
We appreciate you.
Thank y'all.
We need a consensus for.
You need three. You need at least three to say yes.
She's asking if we're making consensus on it now, or if we're listening to everybody first and then coming back and looking at it.
I don't have a problem making a consensus right now.
We actually
Mr. Gamble, good? I'm good. Mr. Hale's good? I'm good.
Yes.
I'm not good with it, but that's okay. So,
Thank you.
six questions, that's all. I still have questions on the radio system, but I'm not going to answer today.
Thank you, sir.
So 109, we'll go back to contingency. The 109,000 that you just reduced his budget for will be added back to the contingency.
No, we reduced it by 200.
Well, we had 10,218,176 in the budget.
He's got to update it.
This amended one is.
The difference, yes, you are correct, Nina. The difference would go back in the contingency line.
I took the 200 away and made it 91.
The one that we have, the 91's already in.
Yes.
Should I get Shirley in there? No, I just have this. Okay, it's exactly 91,000.
those in the, so now it's 200.
I took what we had in the budget and deducted the 200,000 and added the 91 in that we didn't have an updated sheet for, which would be 109 back to your contingency.
There were 75 already, there, so how much?
I never put that in this year's because it was broken down on a different line
Okay.
for this next year's budget.
Okay.
I just had the 10, 218, 176 in there.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask a question. Nina, based on the sheet that I have, the budget for the sheriff's department would be $10,109,176. Is that what you have? That's the sheet that the sheriff just, if you take the sheet that he just gave you and you subtract from that 10,000 or 10,309, subtract 200,000 from that.
Okay. 10, 109.
You'll have 10,109,176. Correct.
And you have 10, 218, 176 in the budget. So 109,000 will be added back to your contingency.
Correct.
I think that's what we started with.
I know what she's getting at, so I understand. Mr. Chairman, question about that $75,000 that was set aside for the communication systems on different line item last year. It wasn't added in this year. Where was it? Was it sitting out there somewhere? Is it sitting out there somewhere else that's going to be zeroed out with $91,000? Because I know we had put it in the budget the last couple of years, $75,000 for radios, as well as, I believe, EMS, fire EMS. So I'm trying to figure out where that 91 comes in relation to 75.
We've never had it in there before. I think you got one proposal there where we had 75 there, before Randy, got the numbers for us and went up to 91. But we didn't have it, but we just have to off the side to see if we could, that added to the budget. We just said, hey, just like we do with smart cop, you didn't add to my budget, you just gave the money off to one side for us to do with the smart cop. Now, all the plans there, we changed it around, added it to the budget. So the 75 is, we never had it. We still.
Question already come out, but
Yeah.
I do remember seeing it. I just wondered where I saw it at, because I know the last few years it's been budgeted.
Because, see, I just,
I didn't put it in his budget, we may have had a line for it.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
asking for. That's what I was asking Nina, is if there's a line somewhere else.
if you remember right, the last meeting we had with the radio, we had the two companies, Motorola, we had Harris, and then he was, trying to decide which one to go with. Well, since then, Motorola has lost the contract, and now it's just the one company. So we've never been able to even went that far to be. This is the farthest we've got as far as being able to budget the money and to go forward with the rate system. Before we were just negotiating.
Yeah, and I'm not disputing the process. What I'm asking was because we had allocated, and planned on allocating 75 here, 75 but fire EMS, 75 would come out of would be budgeted in the school board, and they dropped out. And so we dropped our total ability to pay this thing $100,000. And I remember last year's budget workshop, we had that $75 allocated somewhere, sitting somewhere, unless it was erased, because we didn't think that we were to use it. But I don't remember that actually being. So what I'm asking is this, is there a line item somewhere in the budget, not necessarily in your budget, but in
It is not in the board's budget.
okay.
I just don't think
I'm asking for what happened.
I just don't think we got that far, Randy. Ricky. Ronnie. I guess
Yeah.
you're right. It got to be ours. I don't think we got that far, Ronnie, as far as we were just negotiating about what company to go with, and we never even got that resolved. It resolved itself because that one company dropped out, but we never got
That was
this.
outside the budget. I was talking about the budget cost. That was outside the budget cost.
Yeah, I know, we never got any budget for 24.
All right, that's all. The only reason why I want to make sure is if there was a $75,000 line item somewhere, I like to see it drop back into the agency. And then the only difference would be 19, 17, whatever.
Well, and
I remember the conversation from
Yeah.
last budget, but I can't remember if we created a line or not.
And I think
we did. I don't think we did create a line.
I don't remember it either. I mean, I think we was just having a discussion about it, and we never got any further than that.
but I can't say that with 100% confidence. But regardless, at this time, I appreciate your comments, Mr. Richardson. I just want to verify our consensus today is for 10,109,176. Just so we're clear about that for any other discussion we had. Okay, Sheriff, we're good. We'll move forward. Thank you, sir. 10,109,176. With all due respect, Mr. Richardson, we will do some research. I'm in agreement that if it's somewhere out there, you put back in. And
Mr. Chairman, that was the only question I had really about the communication systems.
fair enough. I just want to be fair to you and the sheriff. I just didn't want you to think I was trying to cut you short. Mr. Harris.
Mr. Chairman, you're now about to get into, well, with the exception of the extension office, you're otherwise about to get into all of the county departments. I was going to ask, since you have had these notebooks now for a few weeks, if you actually need to go department by department, or you might otherwise just entertain questions the commissioners have them on these budgets. You've got a balanced budget in front of you. You've got a contingency line. But where we typically spend the majority of your time is those last 2 or 3 pages of unbudgeted items. I had emailed pages to you with proposals last week, and we could maybe streamline some of this and just go to those pages if you want to do, unless commissioners felt they needed to go department by department and just spend a lot of time. Because typically you'll spend a lot of time and then you'll end up right on those last 2 pages. So that's just a question. We're here to facilitate whatever your need is. But if you don't need to go through all those departments one at a time, then we can get right to your questions. Try to make some things happen here.
I don't have a problem with the streamlining process. I just, I want the board to be satisfied with any questions they have. Give me just a minute. I got Mr. Norris here. Come on, Mr. Norris. We're gonna let you have your say right here real quick. And I think the board's got a lot of questions for you, so you just come on up here. I'm just kidding. Welcome, sir. Jim Norris, Economic Development Director.
Yes, sir. Pretty much our budget mirrors everything we had last year. Anything slight reduction, other than what was mandated, from insurance taxes. So that's on the economic development side. We're going to talk about that a little bit, so we kind of mirror what we previously done.
I don't have any questions. I think we're good there.
As far as TDC, as you guys know, that's a little bit different because that's money in and money out. So we kind of have to operate on as what comes in on that tax revenue. That number will constantly change. We've already seen it from this initial budget drop on the expenditure side just because some of the events that have taken place got canceled. So we don't pay out those funds. So while the revenue drops on the tourism side, we're also not spending as much money as well. But it's kind of money in and money out, so it doesn't really affect.
Fair enough. I'm good. Nope. You good? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Norris. Appreciate you this morning. Okay, here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to go down and I'm going to just speak to the department, and I'm going to ask if there's any questions for it. Not we're rolling.
Mr. Chairman, real quick before I just found things that I was asking for, Mr. Norris, it has to do with tourist development, and that is this. We have requested $275,000 local option tourist development tax on the revenue side, and a requested 2021 on the page that you provided, $250,000. I'm just asking why the
I couldn't hear the first part of it.
Okay, so on the page that you provided, the local option tourist development tax.
Yes, sir.
We showed that last year's budget was 275, projected annual for 2020, 45, requested budget 250. When you get down to the green bar, we've got local option tourist development tax requested budget for 2020, 21, 275. Yours says 250. This was.
Well, that was projected, that 250 looks like projected numbers.
This was requested. This is under a requested item. And so I'm not matching it up.
Our requested budget was 275. The 250 may be projected revenue. Wow.
Well, in the paperwork that you provided, it says requested budget. That's
It's
fine.
still a forecast. The 275.
And again, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying why the two didn't match. Both of them showed up.
Well, what we provided was a 250 number, but that was what we were projecting revenue in. Our projected actual budget was 275. That's what the board voted on. But again, right now, we could be at 230. It's all going to have to do with tourism, how many people can stay in the hotels. So to be quite honest, that budget is really a big guess.
So clarification, you're requesting 275.
275, but again,
I know,
you're not
I
going to
realize
provide the 275, that'll just be the tax. So it's not something the county's actually providing to
We
us.
submitted a revised revenue statement, you'll get that before the tentative hearing.
Okay, it was
We
not.
upped it to two seventy-five as part of the changes.
That was the answer, that was the.
We have a copy of it in here.
August.
Innovation construction, I don't know if they're gonna do it until 11.
Thank you, Mr. Norris. Okay, at this time, we're moving forward. Do I have any questions or comments on the building department? Seeing none, we're moving forward. Do I have any questions or comments on maintenance? Seeing none, moving forward. Suwannee River Regional Libraries, do I have any questions? Seeing none. Extension Office, do I have any questions?
Budget, except this. They did not budget an extension agent to replace Catherine. Has anyone heard anything about, are they not planning on replacing Catherine's position in 2020? Salaries didn't reflect the position.
Well, the vacancy,
But we always budget for the vacancies as well.
we typically budget for vacancies.
I just wanted to wait.
I haven't, but that salary's not.
No, it's partially by us, partially by the person.
Ms. Carolyn, you can come speak.
Yes, ma'am.
So, the mayor's approved, my position, taking on the county director role. I went through a state interview and a county interview. So that paperwork hasn't gone through yet. So then I would be the person taking on the director role.
That actually happened, I think my last email was Saturday on that. So it was the end of last week, but the question had to do with the budget and position, I think.
Yeah. And congratulations.
I think it's in regular salaries, and we just need to move the money up now she's approved as director.
I think Commissioner Richards' question had to do with budget and vacancies. Is that your
Well,
question?
whenever I looked at the line items under that position for the salaries, which is separate from regular salaries, it was zeroed out for 2021. And what I was asking was, if anybody heard that they were filled, but now that they filled the position, don't we normally, under a vacancy, don't we normally budget for that vacancy?
Well, we knew that she was interim, so she's still getting paid out of the 1,200 line with regular salaries, which increased now that included what she's gonna get as director. I don't know, but we can move, she will move up to
then her position would be vacant as well. They're not filling that. Okay.
I don't know about her position once she leaves it.
No, I'll be one. And just FYI, the county only pays 25% of my salary.
Okay.
In March,
I know it was a percentage, that's what was your comment.
Thank you, Ms.
That's
Fairwell.
all the question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Congratulations. Yes.
I think you are correct, though, Commissioner, that we would typically show a vacancy on that line rather than budget accordingly. So you're correct, it's zeros.
It won't change the overall
They
budget.
do appear to be a little bit unique, but no, it doesn't change the overall budget.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments for the rec department? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Fire rescue.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just point out that I spoke to Chief Fan, and we're going to reflect the 91,000 in there for radios as well. I just want clarification.
Thank you, sir. Moving right along to yourself, Mr. Harrison.
I don't have any questions.
Always got to be somebody key, don't they? Oh, gentlemen. We're moving forward to our, Mr. Harrison, we'll move forward to this page.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, like I said, you had an opportunity to take a look at this. I guess I emailed it last week. I spent quite a bit of time. You'll notice on these, this is the pages or items that were not in the budget. On here, I've put some requested actions, and I'll just point out that there are lots of these that I'm proposing that we hold off until the following year. So we'd be revisiting some of these items in your next budget workshops next year. Otherwise, the proposals that I've made here with EMS and fire, and solid waste, the ones where I've noted a requested action approval, reflect utilizing contingencies in those funds, which do not affect the board's contingency at all. When you get down there to where it says general, Part 1930, the overhaul of the lift station at the jail, that isn't optional. I'm proposing that we take that from our equipment reserves in the amount of $70,000, and then jump on down to the where it says general 1110, $44,000 for the generator at the courthouse. That's for the IT. They've installed a lot of servers in there. We weren't aware they had overloaded the generator until the power went off a few months ago. And I mean, all of the computers were shut down, so they absolutely have to have a generator that will service the load that's on that from that server room. I propose that that be taken from equipment reserves as well. And I'm just going to point out, y'all know that all of our reserve lines are what help us to maintain the cash flow. That's part of the pot of money that we use to fund the government while we're waiting for the several months for tax revenues to come in or waiting for grant reimbursements. So next year, or not this coming year, but the following year, I propose trying to put that money back in there. The next items on that page, the first page, I'm just proposing that we hold until 2022. The second page, page 2 of 2, you've got more items that I'm proposing that we hold. The position of the building department, there's a contingency that we're just going to need to fund that position out of. I'm going to request that you go ahead and fund that position out of the building department contingency line, because we've got some staff that we've had some conversation about a position potentially retiring. We don't know exactly when, but we need to be prepared and have someone trained to step into that. The next two positions there, you've got, it says road and bridge, but I'm going to propose that we use, take the first one, the $54,000 one. Let us fund that from some vacancies that we have in the road department now. Second one for $43,000 plus, we would create a position in solid waste. Those positions work together, they go back and forth between the road department and solid waste anyway, those types of repairs that they're involved in. None of that would affect your contingency line in the board. And then the balance of those unfunded projects or equipment, we would just hold until 2022 for consideration. So on those two pages, you have no effect to your board contingency. If you go to the third page, this is typed up separately because we didn't have sufficient information on some of these things. In fact, we're still working on some of these. I was working on some of these yesterday. That first one on these dump trucks. The company that we obtained these dump trucks from, the dump trucks for the road department, has notified us that they are going to be filing for some type of bankruptcy, reorganization or something. And they've indicated to us that they can't fulfill their obligation to us. And that lease agreement, they were supposed to take the trucks out in 13 months. They provide new ones for us every 13 months. And we had a cap of either 3 or 5% increase. Since they're not going to be able to fulfill their obligation, our rate schedule for the lease payments increases. The finance mechanism is with a different company. It's leased to the company that we use for the majority of our financing anyway on equipment. And we know what that schedule is going to be. It's about a $200,000 difference increase. We are still working on, and I hope to come back with other ideas on these trucks going forward, but we'll revisit that in a regular board meeting. But for now, it appears that it's going to be a $200,000 hit. In addition to that, I'm going to try to finalize this conversation today. We're trying to schedule a conference call. We may have an additional, in the current year, we may have an additional $69,000 that we have to spend because there was a payment that we budgeted for in the current year at the amount that it should have been. But since the company's going out, the payment in September may be higher. That would be about $69,000 in the current year. So my proposal going forward is that we reduce the number that's in the proposed budget for chip seal from $400,000 to $199,960. That number was in the budget. If we reduce that, that'll allow us, we can then take that difference and move it back into the lease budgets for the trucks that we have, and we'll be able to take care of those payment obligations. And it won't affect your contingency line. If you go take a look at CDBG, we've been back and forth and lots of conversations in the last week with Tallahassee over the effect that the Gloucester bankruptcy is going to have on our CDBG funding. Right now, I'm believing that there's a chance that DEO will go ahead and reimburse us what we've turned in. I can't say that factually until probably later this week. We've been working real hard for the last month on this. We're believing we're getting close to getting a written response from them. I have a plan in place that I will discuss with you by the time we get to our tentative budget meeting, if they do not agree to reimburse for that grant. Next item on there is a splash pad that's been discussed, I guess, for several years. But I was asked to try to figure out how we could fund that without affecting your contingency. And I put a series of funding proposals together that would get us pretty close to that $150,000 estimated cost. I think we'd end up about $15,000 short that other local entities would have to raise to put with what I proposed there. And I'm going to point out, if you go down to that second item under proposal, it says allocate $40,000 for the sale of the soccer field. The balance of that money right now, we've talked about putting toward the Douglas Center. But I want to point out to you that in the proposed budget, the way it's written, I'm gonna say this for Commissioner Fleming's benefit, he's been intimately involved in that project over there, that we had spent that down in the current year to about $36,000. We started with 60, it was spent down to about 36. Commissioner Fleming, I put a proposal in there to take it back up to 60. So it would be 60 plus the balance of the sale proceeds from the soccer field. In any event, if the board agreed to those, it doesn't affect your contingency. And then we're down to the outside agencies. And you'll just have to decide what you want to do. If you don't have any issues with any of the proposals that I've made, it might be best to go ahead and make that determination before you move to your outside agencies. Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Harris. At this time, let's have some discussion on banking. If you have questions and concerns about these items, please. Mr. Richardson, looks like you got something in mind.
I just want to hear what the rest of the board had to say. The only question I had is on the chip seal funding. I assumed that what was unspent this year will be rolled over into next year's general fund. Therefore, there's basically washed out. So the 199 would be all new, correct, for next year? And that would be...
No, this wouldn't be in addition to what the balance is for the current year. This would actually be, we would actually have the 199,960 follow the recommendations that I make
That would be the total for 2021 period.
That's correct. And Commissioners, let me just say something about that. Because my hope is that we get to a couple of other projects next year. While this particular line would then read 199,960, you actually have some other projects that we budgeted for with chip seal that I hope to be able to get to next year. And those have their own separate line items in the board's budget. One of those is the chip seal at Suwannee Lake, and the other is chip seal here at the Coliseum. And we've been so busy doing other projects, we haven't been able to get to them in the current year, and that's always the case. But those lines are still intact in the budget, and if we get to those, we will. I want to point out to you that we've got a full year's worth of work working really hard using our staff, because the state allocation of $300,000 that we received to build 175th Road out at the Catalyst site, that estimate is actually closer to $680,000. Unless I can obtain another grant from rural infrastructure, we will have to construct that ourselves in order to be able to cover the expense without state allocation, which means we would go in and build all of the base and then use the state's money to cover the cost of the asphalt. So our staff, our employees with road department equipment will be tied up on that project for several months. And then we've got the two chip seal projects that I mentioned to you, in addition to using our staff to do work out at the collection site at Welborn, that property we bought 2 years ago that we still need to develop. So we've got a full plate next year, and I don't have any reason to believe that we would be able to, we may not be able to even spend the 199 that would be in here, but then we would be able to start with that and maybe roll it over into next year.
Go ahead.
One more question. $200,000 estimate, $200,000 of reimbursement that we may not receive. That's money already spent, correct? So it's not going to negatively impact our expenditure. It just will be money that we can't count on forever.
It has the potential, well, it would affect the budget, but like I said, my plan is to have a response from them, hopefully this week in writing. They've actually got, DEO has their attorney working on it. They're supposed to send us a letter hopefully this week. It would affect us if they do not agree to reimburse.
I think what he's asking, it would affect us, but those invoices have already been paid, correct?
we have already paid them, but we haven't programmed in the funding. What I would probably do is, because we're anticipating it being reimbursed, the way this budget's built, we're anticipating the revenue coming back in from that grant. So what I would do at that point, if they do not, is I'd look at one of our capital reserve lines, and that's where I would propose taking the money so it doesn't affect your contingency line. And then, again, we have to be committed to building those reserve lines back up. That's a dangerous precedent to fall down.
That's fine. That's all.
Okay. Any other questions on these items? I'll run through some things real quick, just for my thoughts.
Yes, yeah, I'd like to, on this, with the company on the truck, can you hear me?
It's kind of hard to hear you, Mr. Clyde.
The name of the company that supply the dump trucks is
Right.
Capital Trucks out of
Capital.
Tallahassee.
I'm good with that, but thank you for that money back to Douglas Center. I really appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clyde. The dump truck situation is, I will say I've been involved in some of the conversations. Mr. Harris has kept me up to speed. And it's just a product of, not of our doing, and it's something that we guys got to hit head on and move on past it. Chip seal is how we're going to get there at this year, in this coming year. As far as the splash pad, I would just like to make a couple of comments. This $60,000 sidewalk project is a project that I asked last year that we had discussion with on 129 South. Basically, I was going to try to start setting, or ask the board to consider setting aside money each year until I had enough money to do that project. It was probably going to be $300,000 to $400,000. I just, looking at where we're at and seeing this year that we couldn't do anything because of the shortfall of our funds, I feel like I needed to back up and talk to Mr. Harris. Our offices want to reach out to DOT and try to get those folks to help us. They have a building resurface project coming along in 24 out that way, so we're hoping we can get some help with those folks and get that project done. I asked the board to consider taking this money from that I had set aside last year and try to move forward with this splash pad that we've been doing this next coming year. And that's where the funds come from that we'd already set aside. The $35,000 was from Greg's department. Obviously, the $40,000 is kind of what it's self-explanatory, but I just want to kind of give a brief background of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do something that the board can actually get done. It's a project we can push forward as a board, and I would just ask for your support on the matter. If you have any questions that I can answer for you.
I appreciate that. I was concerned about the sidewalks too, because I was proponent of sidewalks, trying to get things done. But discussions with Mr. Harris about it, it seems like there's a lot more work that's got to be done to get that come to fruition. I am wondering about $15,000 that we're going to try to look for in other places for the splash pad. Just don't want to.
We're going to take that from Branford.
That's fine.
They're agencies, they're entities in the county that have expressed an interest in raising the funds to make up that difference. We could probably save $15,000 on electric and turn those air conditioning on.
I have to agree with that. Ask them to bump it down, or bump it up and agree, but then
Is that being managed out of Atlanta?
I think you're going to have to cut the power off.
Out there, throw that switch here in a minute.
Gentlemen, do I have any other questions on these items that we discussed?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Wouldn't it be better to go through each one and get consensus, or is it unanimous for everything he just said? And could y'all please list each item that's on here as a unanimous vote, a consensus?
We're getting to a unanimous consensus pretty quick. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Mr. Chairman, I'm good with everything that was suggested.
Thank you, Commissioner Rick.
Okay, can we start with equipment? Do we have three?
We have board consensus on every item. We're gonna make it short and simple. I have consensus from Commissioner Richardson, I have consensus from Commissioner Fleming. I provide my consensus, Commissioner Hale.
Yes, sir.
He's positive, Commissioner Gamble's positive. All those items on that page, ma'am, are good.
For the 5-year lease, not the purchase on item 1.
That's correct.
The new tanker, the contingency for solid waste. The lift station at the jail, are we gonna do reserve capital?
Out of,
money?
that's equipment reserve,
The new generator at the courthouse,
equipment reserve,
the alarm we're holding till 2022. The new pickup truck 2022. The SUV 2022. Supervisor elections 2022, the building. Part-time to full-time for Branford 2022.
correct.
Building contingency for building staff assistant.
That's correct.
Road department vacancy will cover the concrete position.
The 54,514 position.
Solid waste will cover the 43,699.
Right,
The building improvements hold till 2022 for the road department.
right,
The tennis court, top dresser, and Little River Springs aluminum stairs hold till 2022.
correct,
Pool improvements hold till 2022.
correct.
Okay, I'm good. Sorry.
And then, Mr. Chairman, if I could, and then we're going to reduce the 400,000 that's in the budget for chip seal to 199,960. And then you also have the splash pad with the adjustments that are listed in the document. You're taking 60,000 from what's currently budgeted for the sidewalk, that's line 6200-09 in the board's budget. And then we're going to allocate upon sale of the soccer field 40,000 for the splash pad. And we're going to utilize the unique abilities grant for 35,000. And that leaves the discussion on the outside agencies.
Ms. Nina, I want to apologize. I was referring to the last page, although that we have a consensus on all this, but I didn't realize you meant to back up and talk on each one of these categories. I was referring to the last page, so I apologize for cutting you short on
No,
that.
that's okay.
Clarification.
Get it straight in my mind.
I know it's hard to believe, but every now and then I make some mistakes. Bad ones. But, thank you for that.
Are we going to the outside agencies?
Sorry.
To the outside agencies?
My list, I just was gonna ask us to stay where we were at on everyone last year, except for one, which was Vivid Vision, they're at 29,705. I was gonna ask us to do that for 30,000 each, and approve Powell's request. For the total outside agency that I have within 111,000.
What's that tab number?
Three.
It's behind tab 3, the PAL program is not in there, but I think you received that separately.
Yeah, that was a request that came in.
Is that 5,000?
5,000.
Yes, sir. I agree with some of the things that you said. I'm not exactly sure I agree on the PAL program, because I haven't gotten really, I'm not satisfied with the explanation behind the request. We provide them facilities, and that's what we've been budgeted for as far as our gift over to them. I'm not sure exactly that that's a request that I'm going to grant this year. I have no desire to fund the United Way at this point. And Meridian, we didn't fund last year, and I can't remember exactly where we already provide statutory funding for. So, I don't have a problem though with the 29,705 and $130,000 now. Not exactly sure where that number comes from, I guess it comes from them, but on bid additions. But other than that, I look at the difference of it being $180,000 going down to $106,000. That's what I'm at. That's staying last year, just raising bid additions.
Mr. Gamble, can you state what you said again, because I didn't have a tab open. I couldn't hear you real well, Mike.
Mr. Chairman,
What I had to add, what I wrote down from that meeting that we had was,
I would, for Nina's benefit, you might want to just take these one at a time and go ahead and decide what kind of census you have on it.
All right, let's do this. That'll be simple, and we have a discussion on what we have. Let's start with the historical commission. Is everyone fine with that number? Do I have consensus?
Yes.
I have a consensus from the board, Ms. Nina,
Correct.
at the 16,000. Suwannee Valley Geological Society, $2,000 consensus. I have consensus, Ms. Nina. ARC, $30,000.
Yes.
We have consensus. Suwannee Valley 4Cs, $10,000.
I want to approve them at the same level we did last year.
5,000. I'm in agreement with the 5,000. Commissioner Hale? We're at 5,000, Ms. Nina. Hooked on Heroes, 1,500. We have consensus on 1,500. Suwannee County Chamber of Commerce, 20,000.
Yes.
I have consensus on 20,000. Vivid Visions, 29,705.
I was just asking, we rounded up to 30,000.
I'm in support of 30,000. We have consensus, Ms. Nina. Meridian Behavioral have requested 3,000.
No.
No.
We said no. I'm in agreement. We have consensus for no. DAV, 1,500.
Yes.
I would offer that, I would like to increase that to 2,000. More than consider. Sir?
I was gonna say 2,500.
And I'm fine with that.
I don't think okay. Good.
Do I have consensus at 2,500? Yes. I have, we're asking for 2,500. Is we have consensus on 2,500 for DAV.
No, they haven't asked for it, so, but okay, that's the board of fund.
They're close to my heart, and they do a lot with it. That's, and honestly, sometimes people just don't ask, even though they badly need it. You know what I'm saying?
They need it. We had conversations about it, with the budget constraints. They were just being respectful and keeping it at the same request.
Thank you, gentlemen. United Way of Suwannee Valley, we have a request for $4,000.
No. Same as last year.
Same as last year.
Yeah.
Our consensus is the same as last year. And can we get that total now?
Shelby Powell.
I'm sorry. We have a request from PALS for, what was that number? $5,000 request from PALS. Gentlemen, what is your?
Mr. Chairman, can I say something?
Yes, sir.
I think this is the first time we didn't have a rep to actually come, state anything. Kind of a little disappointed that no one came. Was our about it, and I've thought about it, and it is for the benefit of the kids in the community. And if they don't get the 5,000, we could give them something. I was kind of thinking 2,500. More, want to do more? I'm fine with that.
you good at 5, you got 2 good at 5, so we just need 1 more.
That's just like an explanation. That's all I'm asking for. I mean, we didn't have anybody here to talk to us, so it was, kind of, have a letter.
That was my only hold up about it, that no one came, and I did say we'll give them half. But I know it's for the sake of the church. I support it.
At the end of the today, and it's about the children, I mean, I'm just supporting the 5,000.
Yeah, it's the children of the park.
So we have consensus on 5,000. Commissioner Richardson, I understand your concerns, and maybe we can get some clarification.
We can request a justification
That's all I'm asking.
beyond the actual request. We'll ask for some justification from them in writing.
And that's not being unreasonable at all.
No, it's not.
How can,
I have no problem, I support anything that you, yes, I just would like to know.
absolutely. I appreciate it.
We have some really good organization out there.
Put it contingent upon them coming in and doing a presentation.
I'm sorry?
I said you could put it contingent upon them coming in and formally requesting it.
Oh, we've got consensus already.
I know.
I'm just
I
saying.
think they have to supply Eric with a financial audit or something before we release the funds next year anyway.
Okay.
So what is our total now that you have?
We're going 5 with Powell's.
Yes, ma'am.
Keith and I are trying to agree. $112,000.
112?
Thank you, gentlemen. That takes care of that. Do we have any other items to discuss?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I will provide the board with updated information as soon as I have it on the dump trucks and on the CDBG funding for the rail out there. Again, I'm hoping to have that this week. We've been pushing real hard, communicating with them every week for the last at least a month, trying to get to the bottom of this. But I'll give it to you, forward it to you as soon as I have it.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Lou, do you have a, Christine, do you have a contingency update? Contingency update? I am, and any request that I make beyond that will be after we get the information on dump trucks. We get the exact number
On
on
the 610,000.
because is that $200,000 that you have put in for on this information sheet for the dump trucks? Do you believe that's a high number or a low number or a middle number or where are we going from that?
Well, I actually think it's going to be pretty close to being an accurate number. And that number isn't really a guesstimate unless something changes. Otherwise, I have the pay schedule on the finance mechanism with that particular company. It represents an increase of $18,000 per truck. So I used the current payment, added the 18 to it, and that's where it's coming from.
Okay.
But I still have this $69,000 question in the current year that I'm trying to work out, hopefully today.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Have a-
418,137. 418,137.
418,137.
We started with 421.
We added back in 109,000. We took off 112 for outside agencies.
Okay, sorry, I forgot about 109.
So the outside agency wasn't already figured in.
No,
So what was it again?
418,137. $418,137. None of those are in there.
Do I have any questions or comments
clarify again, the money that's left over in this year's budget from the chip seal is rolling over, or is it going?
No.
It is not. Hundred and
Let
ninety-nine.
me point something out to you real quick. Nina and I have had 25 workshops before we got here. There were times where at one point we were $1.7 million off on revenues versus proposed expenses. So we've been through this many, many times. And I wanted to point that out because I really appreciate what Nina has had to go through. It hasn't been easy. It's been a very, very difficult year. And Keith has participated in it. But I'm just telling you, it's been a tough year. So the chip seal funding, at one point I had it in there higher than 400,000. I think I had it at 700 something, 750,000, I believe.
That's what we did last year.
Well, I mean, I had proposed to take it to 700 plus, going forward into next year. But I had to, when I had a $1.7 million problem, I had to go through all of the budgets, make cuts. And it came back down to the 400,000. But then when this truck issue started, we were notified that that company was going bankrupt. That meant that I had to shift to the pay schedule with the finance company, which, I don't want this to be too complicated, but the first year of financing on each of those trucks was $15,000, jumps considerably. Into the second year, which wasn't going to be a problem because they were going to replace the trucks every 13 months. That's what they were supposed to do. But now it isn't happening. So we're on the pay schedule with that higher payment year 2. That's where this expense is coming from. And in order to cover that expense, after we put everything together without affecting your contingency line of the board, I had to reduce, and it was in the road department, I just reduced the chip seal line. Also recognizing we had a year's worth of work anyway, that would be tied up in. So, no, to answer your question, it isn't rolling forward. This is a new number for that particular line.
But the other two projects are not coming out of that.
The other two projects are not a part of that. Those are on their own standalone lines of course. Or no, actually, I think we did put them in the road department, but they are standalone lines.
One thing about it, just come to me about did you ever, I know you did, you speak to Mr. Freeman about some monies that maybe we could recapture through the bankruptcy? Did we pursue that?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I hesitate to comment on things that may become a part of litigation. I've got some thoughts on that. I also recognize and I'm familiar with the language that was in our development agreement and sub-grant agreement with Foster at the time that was put together. I'll be glad to speak to each of you individually later about that. But,
I know some of that's time sensitive, that's what I want to mention.
well, it is, but there are some other issues associated with some of that. Now, we've got representation in that case. In fact, I just paid an invoice. We've got a law firm that's handling that for us. So we're still involved in that.
On the change the subject, on the lease purchase on those trucks, what's the buyout on that, or do you know?
Well, I'm working on that. It's a very complex issue. And we're dealing with somewhere between 8 and 10 companies right now. We've got prices from everyone on these trucks and the different terms associated with them. And to give you the short story, we're actually dealing with a very large company that handles auctions on dump trucks. To see if we can create our own exit strategy on those trucks. And I'm feeling pretty good about our conversations with this company. What I was gonna put together was this, I was gonna try to put a scenario together where we purchase lower at a state contract price, and then we sell them after a year, and then go right back into the new truck that keeps us under warranty all the time. That's why we agreed to this issue with the first company. The significance of the 13 months it's an issue associated with federal excise tax. Otherwise, your question is, well, why did we do it 13 months instead of 12 months? But there's a federal excise tax issue associated with that.
But, what do we have, 8 under lease?
10.
10? Best I remember, the purchase price on them was what, roughly 160?
That's pretty close. 158,000.
Yeah, so, you know, I know it won't be 1.6, but we paid some on them, but, so. I'm just trying to do the math in my head, what, maybe around $1 million, $1.2 million, something like that. The outright purchase, what we got?
Well, we bought them 3 different times. We've got 3 contracts. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I will say this, the first payment was around $15,000 a piece for that first 13 months, and then it jumps to 38,000.
Yeah, well, in my mind, when it got out of the $20,000 range and got into the $40,000, it became a little unreasonable for me on the lease part of it.
Well, 15 was great.
Yeah.
I mean, on the plus side, there was a huge benefit in us doing that. But the company that we're dealing with now, I think that we can work it out where they're able to auction things off every 12 months, every 13 months. And if we're buying them lower other state contracts, what the private sector is buying them off the truck lot for, and we've already got margins built in there where they can go sell those things at auction.
But for us to do that, we have to own them, correct? Pay for them?
Well, literally, we own them anyway.
I mean, but they gotta be paid for, or?
No, they don't have to be paid for, as long as you're selling those to cover their principal.
I think it's ongoing discussion. I just don't know if we have the answers to that all.
I'm gonna be working on that today. In fact, Shannon's trying to schedule a conference call for me today.
I was just trying to figure out if we needed to find $1 million to set aside to outright pay for them, or if you're going to be able to work out a finance mechanism that's going to work. I don't want to keep paying $40,000 each a year for them.
We're gonna come up with a better plan. I just don't have the details on it today.
Yeah.
And I don't mind telling you, one of my foremost issues with this is that if my county attorney wasn't down right now, I'm planning to push the contract that we've got with the company that's planning to file for bankruptcy.
Well, that was the other question I had.
That they have an obligation, so I'm pushing that issue at the same time I'm dealing with the finance company over here, trying to figure out how to mitigate the effects going forward. I'm dealing with this from 2 different angles right now.
Well, there again, it goes into, it's kind of hard to have a lot of discussion, so we need to like, we're trying to understand what your options are. And I think that's where we're at. But I mean, I'm just doing some, you see, you want to make that up. Definitely. Seriously, about the best answer to remedy. Any other questions or comments, Mr. Chairman?
That's not my vote.
Do we have any other comments from the board about anything that we discussed in this workshop?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say I appreciate the expedition of this meeting. For those of us who are in re-election, it's kind of important, so I very much appreciate this. Mr. Harrison, when that was way, I think most of us got our issues up front, kind of dealt with it. On the back. Thank you.
We'll have closing comments in just one moment. I would just like to ask if there's anyone from the public wishing to speak on anything that has to do with the budget workshop. Seeing none, this time we'll close the public
Oh,
comment.
I have one more thing.
Sorry.
Oh, I got one more thing. On the radios, I know we went up to 100, I mean, not to 100, to 91,000 on annual payment. What did the overall purchase, is it going to come to?
It's a little over 1.5 million. I think those numbers that I ran were I ran it at 1.6 when I talked to the finance company, but it's a little over 1.5.
But that's divided between the two. Right.
I get that, but if I could give you 1.6 in cuts, would y'all be willing to pay cash for it?
Let me, commissioners, I'm going to tell you, we've got a good budget here. We've got things that we have talked about, we need to do. We can flatten this budget. My concern with flattening the budget is that it affects your carry forward next year, not knowing what revenues are going to be from the state next year either. I would ask that you leave this budget the way it is. Give us time to try to work on this truck issue and give you information on it so you have it.
I'm curious to know where Mr. Gamble's got all this money at. We got $1.5 million for the regulars, and he's got another $1.5 million for the dump trucks, and I can show it to you
And
real
I'll,
quick.
real quick, on top of you saying this, what the state cuts are gonna be,
In 3 lines, I can show it to you.
more certain,
Oh, I could cut this thing all to pieces, but you're gonna have to come back and revisit things later. Right now,
And what I'm proposing, you got 91,000 from fire, 91,000 from sheriff. That's already there. I know we put the 200 back into the contingency. I was figuring that rolled to 382. We had rolled over 170,000 for the land acquisition of the convention center, which has kind of died. That puts you at,
can you stop there for 1
That
second?
was supposed to be TDC revenues that we rolled.
that wasn't TDC funds there, was it?
Balance forward. Last year, y'all moved it from contingency.
See, that's that 170 we kept looking for last year, that it wasn't
TDC.
supposed to be TDC funds.
What, the last minute, I think we moved the contingency back in and used balance for TDC reserves. I'll have to go get my budget from last year, but
I knew we went back up on that 170, but I don't think that was TDC. If it was, it wasn't supposed to be from original, it was from general fund, because we were doing 170,000 a year out of general. Now, if it got moved last year, I don't remember that.
I'll pull the notes from last year on what everybody voted on at the hearings, but.
I had a question about the same.
Yeah, I don't remember. I know originally, when we originally set it up, we were going to do 170,000 a year out of general for 3 years to make the payment on that. And there was no way to get 170,000 a year out of TDC, because TDC doesn't bring in but about 240 a year. So I know
We
that.
only get 1% of that.
Mhm.
We only get 1% of that.
I know, I'm talking about total TDC. So that's all I'm saying. I know originally it wasn't from TDC because it would have been more than a third of TDC's budget, and we were setting aside $170,000 a year. Last year we didn't do it. It just kind of, the purchase of the property kind of fell apart, and so we quit moving forward with that.
Well, it's in next year's budget, so y'all can do whatever you want to do. It's sitting in a line in next year's budget.
And then the other, $1,141 was out of the administrative building site work plans. Anyway, on my paperwork, it put me at 1.5 million. And I thought I'd rather pay as we go instead of finance.
Mr. Chair. Yes. Just in relation to those comments, I have no desire to borrow money. I've said this before, over and over again, not to borrow any more money. We don't absolutely have to. I would rather see it paid cash. But having said that, we have still not had that meeting that we all agreed that we have, where we've had a consultant come in as well as our folks from various regular companies that come out and talk to us. I know since then, things changed from Oklahoma, dropping out, we got a contractor. But there are some good folks out there that have some good solutions that I'm not satisfied with this current solution. So look, that's the reason why I have a problem with $91,000. That's the only reason I have a problem with $91,000. We're already kind of giving a nod to improving said all that, I would be very much interested in having a longer discussion with Mr. Gamble about his solution.
Can't have a conversation.
And you know, not with him. Thank you, sir.
I mean, everybody's got their thoughts. I don't have a problem trying to play with some things, but some things I really understand that, I understand we got some monies but when you run operations this size, you better have some reserves that you can get to. And some of that needs to be taken into account also. But I do agree with what you're doing. I just, with the future, what we're dealing with this year, I don't know if this is the time to just be pulling the trigger and spending what cash we have. That would be my concern. Is, you know, at some point when you spend it and you don't have it, you don't have anything to lean back on, then you kind of in a bad way too. So I completely understand both sides. I do, and
I just throw that out there for food for thought. I said, I just throw it out there for food for thought. We got other meetings that come up before we approve it.
right.
Y'all look over it and see what you think and decide.
Fair enough.
Bring it up.
Fair enough. At this time, we'll just have closing comments, Mr. Harris. Or Mr. Harris.
Mr. Gabbard.
Enjoyed everybody being patient with us.
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you for everybody this morning, and thank you, Mr. Harris, for kind of helping us move this thing along. Can't get kind of bogged down and not get things accomplished. We got through what we needed to. Appreciate Ms. Nina in her office. I would like to invite anyone that's here today and the board, and anyone that's here at Rotary will have a luncheon here at 12 o'clock. Everyone's invited to attend if they so choose. Time I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Got a motion by Commissioner Hale, and all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.